Hello, anyone. I'm Jeff Bushman. This is the Jeff Experience. Let's try that again. This is the Jeff Bushman Experience. And today's date, while we are doing this, while we're recording it, is April the 19th, 2015. I'm going to lean back a little bit because my face looks really bad when it's that close to the camera. Anyway, welcome to the show. I hope you've seen last week's show, which is not numbered, unfortunately. This one will be, but it's video 2. If you did notice video 1 on the site when you went to it, then I would just assume you didn't watch that one. It wasn't very good. But last week's was number 2, and in about a minute and a half, we're going to be joined on the show for a conversation with a naturopathic physician, and I will introduce her more properly in a minute. But today we have pretty much a full show. We're going to be talking, depending on time, we're going to be talking to the doctor. Then we're going to, when we let her go, we're going to talk about this week in history. We're going to talk about famous people who have died. And we're going to, again, assuming time allows, we're going to be talking about treaties and agreements. And I will annoy people who normally agree with me. Okay, if that's not a great tease and a great introduction, I don't know what is. And specifically, we're going to be talking, as I said, treaties and agreements, and specifically Iran and the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And if that hasn't put you to sleep yet, keep with us and we'll go from there. And we're going to do another video next week. You can do us a great favor, by the way. If you're watching this video and decide you like it, first off, if you're watching on a device other than a computer, please turn us vertical rather than horizontal for a minute. And then watch this, visual. Look down there. It'll say subscribe. If you click on that, what will happen is it'll ask you for an email address, and thereafter you will be notified when we upload a new video. If you're watching this in some way other than having come to YouTube and look for us specifically, if you want to search out our other videos, pardon me, you can go to youtube.com and then look under search for Jeff Bushman Experience. Okay, with that preliminary out of the way, let me go ahead and begin the introduction of our guest, whose name I'm going to mispronounce. The doctor is Dr. KATKA Novatkovka, I hope. She'll correct me in a minute. And she's a naturopath here in the Phoenix, Arizona area. And you can look at her website either while you're watching this or afterwards. It's drkatka.com. It's drkatka.com. And she will go ahead and correct my pronunciation now as I introduce her and welcome her to the program. Hi, Dr. Katka.
Hi, Jeff. How are you?
Good. Okay, pronounce your last name.
It's Novakova.
Novakova. Thank you. I put the emphasis on the wrong syllable. Okay. Well, welcome to the program. We have talked numerous times before, and specifically when we were doing the show on the now defunct goingbeyondradio.com. So we're going to cover a topic that we covered previously, which is antibiotic resistance, which really affects us all. So first off, before we get into the subject of the day, talk to us about how you kind of evolved into a naturopathic physician.
Well, that is a long story, but I'll make it really short. Basically, I started as a medical doctor in the Czech Republic, and as I was seeing some of the missing pieces where I didn't have enough time to treat patients, I didn't have enough tools in my toolbox. It wasn't really about the whole body. It was about one organ at a time and one symptom at a time. I thought there must be a different way to approach health and healing. And then I had the opportunity to come to the United States, and I found out about naturopathic medicine, and that just made so much sense. And the biggest difference really was helping the body to use its own resources, and we'll talk about it today with the antibiotics,
right,
is to use its own resources to know what it knows the best, and that is to heal and stay alive and stay healthy. So in few words, that was my journey.
I was saying that was a very short story. How long was it from the time you became an MD until you became a naturopathic physician, the latter being in this country?
It it wasn't really that long because the medical school in Europe is 6 years. So I had 6 years of school, and I was doing residency during that time. And then that was kind of a choice I had to make. I had the opportunity to go to Germany to really continue my medical journey there, or I had the opportunity to come to the United States and become a naturopathic doctor. And I chose that because it truly was so much closer to what I believed was possible for healing. And then ever since then, so I graduated from naturopathic school over 10 years ago, and ever since then it has been a truly learning journey, because there are so many new tools and new therapies still coming up, and we're discovering new things about the body and how it heals. It has been truly exciting journey.
I'll bet. And the question I was going to ask you, when you were in Germany, did you find that you got input there with regard to natural healing? Because that's done obviously a lot more there than it is here.
Yes, Germany is much more open to alternative therapies. So most of the medical doctors know about whether it's homeopathy, herbs, vitamins, minerals. They even know about other therapies like ozone, and so they offer that to their patients more so. So there's more choice available from the very beginning.
Right. So the MDs are actually, I don't know if prescribing is the right word, but prescribing herbs and other supplements to heal their patients.
Yes, it's part of the toolbox, correct.
That's great. What's that were present here? I guess it is present here, but among naturopathic physicians specifically, because you obviously suggest herbs and other supplements. I don't know, in your toolbox, are there also more of the pharmaceutical drugs?
Yes, I'm allowed to prescribe pharmaceuticals as well. And when I need to do that, I do use them when necessary for the proper healing. I do not try to do that much. It usually is just one of the many tools, and if needed, I use them. But I try to utilize natural modalities first.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the problem of antibiotic resistance. Tell us how this arose and well, first let's talk about what the effect of antibiotic resistance is in terms of, I now have an infection, I go to a doctor, I need help with the physician, and with the infection rather. There was a Freudian slip. Anyway, I need help with the infection, and the doctor is inclined to prescribe antibiotics. In fact, the doctor is often inclined to prescribe antibiotics even when I don't have an infection, which is part of the problem. But what's the situation with patients getting antibiotics? Where are the problems?
For many years, and we have been lucky in medicine that we have discovered antibiotics many years ago to help to prevent many people from dying from some of the basic bacterial infections. So antibiotics have been developing in a pretty fast rate, but what has happened over time is bacteria have developed resistance to antibiotics. So what that means, with often prescription of the same antibiotic, the bacteria found a way to become resistant. That means that the antibiotic they used to be able to kill the bacteria is no longer able to kill that bacteria. And then bacterial pool is, all these millions and millions of bacteria in our system, in our body, in our world. They communicate, and they communicate through their DNA. So they're exchanging this information that they have learned about how do I become resistant and how do I survive. It's a survival for the bacteria. How do I survive with this antibiotic? So they have learned it, and then they transfer this information on another bacteria. And so all the bacteria are transferring this information, becoming resistant to more and more antibiotics. And that has actually become a big problem now in the world.
There's also some communications between species of bacteria now, correct?
Yes. There's a whole pool of... it's very interesting. I was just at a conference last weekend, and there was all this information we were taught about the human microbiome. The human microbiome, we have much more bacteria in our body than we have cells.
Right.
And the bacteria becomes part of who we are. It's almost like its own organism. And that has been kind of innate to every human being, and it's a little different for every human being.
Right.
And And so from day one, when our mother already affected that, and all the antibiotics we have taken from very young age has already affected that. So there's so much about bacteria that we are still with the DNA, how they exchange the DNA, how the human microbiome affects our physiology. We're actually still learning.
Right, and of course, not all bacteria are bad.
Correct.
In fact,
Yes, there's a lot of bacteria. That's the good bacteria that we have all heard about. It's called the probiotics.
Right.
And that one is a huge part, and we'll talk about that as we go today. But that's another huge piece of we need to look at.
So the bacteria are communicating, and they are, I almost said talking about, but they are communicating how to resist, how to become resistant to the antibiotics that we have had for years in our arsenal. And I heard something recently, and I'll ask you about that now, and then we'll talk more about the resistance. But there was some discussion about the creation of a new kind of antibiotic drug. I assume you're somewhat familiar with that.
I may not be familiar with that particular one, so you can share more information. But I know that this has become the antibiotic resistance, and what would happen when the last antibiotic stops working. It's almost like there's this huge fear of what will happen, because we'll be back to where we were day one with no antibiotics.
Yeah.
So a lot of researchers are trying to look at, like, what can we do to enhance the antibiotics that we have, or what can we do to actually use completely different principles, and even like using a UV light to try to help the body to use the antibiotic, but then it deactivates the antibiotic so the bacteria cannot become resistant. So there's a lot of other things we're looking at in medicine.
Right. But the thing I'd only heard one snippet in one news report talking about how they had discovered some new class. Never heard again about it at all. Some new class was going to allow a class of drugs. It was going to allow them to create new antibiotics to which the bacteria had not yet developed resistance. And I asked you because I hadn't heard any more, and I assumed that if there was something to it, you'd know it. But apparently, this was either bogus or premature.
Yes, I haven't heard, and I do go to conferences several times through the year, and I have not heard anything about that so far.
Okay.
We're at the place where we still have working antibiotics, but they're becoming less and less. And it's even the broad spectrum antibiotics that we had that used to work. There are some pathogens right now that we have to be really careful about, because it's very, very limiting amount of antibiotics we can use.
Right. Well, let's talk about what's caused and what continues to cause, besides bacterial communication, what's caused the antibiotic resistance to arise.
I think what has happened is we did not realize to begin with how literally smart the bacteria is and how easily it can adapt to these antibiotics. So we have overprescribed antibiotics in our society. So one part, and that's really only these days, it's really a small part, is where we get sick, we go to a doctor, we're given an antibiotic. Then we're given an antibiotic as a prevention, oftentimes, when we have dental work done.
Right.
Then in the hospital, we're given an antibiotic just because we were, doing a surgery. So there's always antibiotic on board for so many illnesses prescribed, or for so many procedures.
Right.
So we have overprescribed antibiotics in medicine, and that's one big piece. The other big piece is we have overused antibiotics, period. And that's even a bigger picture, is we have used antibiotics for livestock, and that has happened in such a large quantity, where it started as, okay, they're sick animal, so we have to heal the animal from bacteria, and then it started being prescribed, and it's still being done in the United States, no longer in Europe or on other continents, to fatten the livestock. So every meat or every dairy, cheese, milk that we get from the traditional farming industry actually has resistant antibiotics in it, and therefore is going to have resistant bacteria in it. Right. So that is a really big picture.
Yeah, and the there was something else. I don't know if you're aware of this. I assume you are, but I read something a while back that said at the beginning of the 20th century, they discovered that, there were, obviously nutrition was very different then. There were almost no McDonald's around the country in 1900. Uh, and there was a time when they found children who were having trouble gaining weight, which again, that should be our worst problem now, right? But there were children who were having trouble gaining weight to a normal weight, and they found that when they gave them antibiotics, they were gaining weight too. And one has to wonder, with all of the antibiotics around us, we haven't talked about, you talked about the meat and you talked about the dairy, but also, in the water supply, and again, because it's out there, in the air now as well, whether that might not be part of the cause of all the obesity we're seeing.
It's very possible, Jeff. There's so much as far as causes of obesity. It's,
Sure.
The food. Of course, it's the food we eat, but then it's the GMO food we
Right.
eat. It's all the toxins in the food. And then you add the antibiotics. They actually disrupt the immune system.
Sure.
And then nervous system, endocrine system, and immune system, they are so closely related. So when we disrupt the immune system, we must be disrupting the endocrine system. And then the weight gain is, it's just part of this whole disruption and the toxicity of the antibiotics, because there's a huge toxicity of this drug coming to our body every single day. So when we drink the water, when we eat the food that has the antibiotics in it, it's a daily exposure that we have and that the body has to deal with.
Can you explain why there are antibiotics in our water system in a way that would not disgust people? Because if I say it, it's going to sound disgusting.
And it's not even through that system. It's more that the antibiotics are not being. So if you think about all the animals and the antibiotics being given to animals and such a large amount, it actually is. I was just looking at it. It's 25 million pounds per year of
Wow.
antibiotics that is being given just to animals, and that. First, it has to be manufactured by the
Sure.
drug companies. So there is the byproduct of the industry right there that goes through the water. Then it's given to the animals, and through the animals, it goes into the ground that's being washed into the groundwater.
Right.
And then the water is being cleaned for human use.
Mhm.
Except what we do, we cleaned everything that we know is in the water.
Right.
And antibiotics, we do not clean antibiotics out of the water. So when we test water, and we would actually test it for all of the drugs and antibiotics, we would be very surprised as to how much
Sure.
is in our drinking water.
Sure. Yeah. Well, the other thing is that I was alluding to is that if I take an antibiotic and am drinking my tea or other liquids, I'm going to do what comes naturally, and this is true of every other human, and some of that antibiotic that goes through my system is obviously going to be in the water. And then,
Absolutely.
And then you add to that the fact that some people, to have antibiotics in the house, they may not finish their prescription. So what they may do is go ahead and dump the extra pills into the sewer system through the commode in the house. And that's also adding to it. And of course, if it's in the water, it's going to be in the air.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate. We were told that a long time ago, how do you best dispose of drugs? And I think it has still stayed in our society as the safest way, when the truth is really far from that.
Yeah.
Because it all will then end up in our water.
Yeah, terrible stuff. So we're getting antibiotics from the antibiotics we take as patients when we're ill and have an infection. And it's overprescribed as well, because patients want a prescription when they go in to see a doctor very often. I'll tell you a quick insight with regard to my mom. And this is not a criticism of my mom, it's a criticism of her doctor, if my mom understood the doctor correctly. And then we also, the bacteria become resistant because everybody else is taking antibiotics. And then you've got it in the water, in the air, in the meat, and the dairy. It's amazing it's amazing it took this long to start building this resistance. The thing about my mom, she went to, this is a while back, and I may have shared this with you if it was before we spoke last time. My mom went to the doctor, and she told me that she'd gotten an antibiotic prescription. I said, why did you get an antibiotic? And she says, because I've got a cold. I said, yeah, antibiotics don't work on colds, and you can explain in a minute why, since you know vastly more than I do. I said, antibiotics don't work on colds. Why did your doctor give you an antibiotic? She says, because I've had the cold a long time.
Mm.
So talk about it for those who don't know. Why are antibiotics ineffective against the common cold?
Well, the common cold is usually a viral infection. So every time we have a viral infection, which is more frequent than bacterial infection during common cold, antibiotic will not be effective because they do not work on viruses. So, and in that case, when the antibiotic is prescribed, it's only creating a resistance down the line for bacteria. But the part about this, Jeff, and it's like it's such a big issue in our medical world because it has been done for so many years, and it has been the standard of care in traditional medicine because we have, these great medicines came along, antibiotics, and they just make you feel better when you take them, when you have, little sniffles here and there. So they have been really prescribed quite a bit, and it has become the standard of care, and it hasn't been advised to the doctors to not be the standard of care anymore, or to be more careful, or to not prescribe unless it's absolutely necessary. And that's one aspect of it.
Right.
And the other aspect of it is that in traditional medicine, again, because of the standard of care, we are not able to bring all the natural therapies in, to bring, the herbs that have high antibacterial efficacy. We're not able to bring the basic vitamin D with such a tremendous immunomodulating effect, and it's able to kill virus and bacteria and supports the body to kill virus and bacteria. And we're not able to bring even how do you actually support your own immune system to do the work. So you don't have to take the antibiotic. So all that is not part of when we go to primary care doctor with a cold. It's almost like the tools are not available. So if the doctor wanted to go and say, I don't really have anything over here, but there's all these other things you can do over here, they don't have that available to them. So it would be for the individual, so it's actually called to the individual to realize is that traditional medicine does not have all the answers, especially when it comes to viruses, and now it's more and more becoming even regarding bacteria. So start looking elsewhere, going back to nature, start looking back to, okay, how can my body actually do this on its own, and how can I strengthen it? It's almost like changing the whole philosophy to going back to the body.
Absolutely. And of course, when they're sick and they feel they need care that they can't do themselves, they could do something really strange like going to a naturopathic physician.
I hope that soon enough we won't have to think about it as something really strange, and that it will be actually the standard of care. Because, like we talked about at the beginning, in Germany, it is very much the standard of care. And many places in Europe, it's becoming the standard of care. So soon enough, it will be in the United States as well. But truly, yes, there are so many naturopathic doctors now in the United States that even just learning, it's not like we would have to go there every time we're sick. It's learning the power of everything we have available to us, whether it's in an herb store, even in a supermarket that we can buy certain spices to help us feel better. I mean, there's so much available to us, and I think it's about accumulating the knowledge and learning that, I don't have to be powerless because I have cold and I need antibiotic. It's bringing the power back to, I have this strong immune system, and let me support it so I can take care of it.
Right. And before we leave the subject of naturopathic physicians, though, and I want to also restate that our viewers can take a look at drkatka.com, drkatka.com. Of course, if you're not in Arizona, and most of our viewers will not be, you can't necessarily take a trip to her, although you're welcome to catch a flight. But the reality is there are naturopathic physicians throughout the country, as you were saying. Is there a way, and we have more to discuss on the main subject, but is there a way someone can find a naturopathic physician in their locality? Is there a website that lists naturopathic physicians, some organization?
Absolutely. There's the American Association of Naturopathic Physicians, and the website is naturopathic.org.
There you go, naturopathic.org, to find a naturopath in your community. Okay, getting back to this subject, I guess the right question would be, what can people do to avoid the problem with antibiotic resistance?
So to stay healthy, right, would be the answer.
Good idea.
Yes. So how do we do that? So especially during either, allergy season right now in Arizona, it's very pronounced, or during the flu seasons, what we want to do is stay ahead of the game. So we take extra vitamin D, we take extra vitamin C, we eat really well. That's a big piece, where every time we overload our system with a lot of dairy, with a lot of carbohydrates and sugars, that actually depletes our immune system and suppresses it. So we eat a lot of vegetables and fruits and a lot of colors in our diet. We get enough sleep, we get enough rest. So we truly help the body to stay energetically up,
right,
and energetically that it can fight the bug by itself, truly.
Right.
And then when we start getting sick with something, then right away we go home, take a nap, take high dose vitamin D, again high dose vitamin C. We do some, like you call it, crazy naturopathic modality, like we do hydrotherapy or red sock therapy. We make sure that when we have a fever, we let it work, because the fever is what the body uses to burn up the bacteria and the virus. So instead of taking Tylenol right away, we give the body a few hours of fever to do the work. So a few basic things like that, and then we can go and get some powerful antibiotic herbs like echinacea and golden seal. We could find those at any health food store today, and just take it several times a day. Little things like this will make a big difference.
We recently found through the book, and I cannot remember the name of the author to save my life. I tried to look for the book earlier today, which we have in the house. But there are two books. One is called Herbal Antibiotics, and the other one is called Herbal Antiviral. In the herbal antibiotic book, they talk about a number of herbs that you can get, typically in extract form. One of the ones we have used successfully in our home, and I assume you're familiar with it, is cryptolysis.
As an herb?
Yeah, yes, and it comes in. Pardon me. It comes in an extract. I think it's cryptolysis, and and being in an extract, of course, it's an alcohol. I haven't had to use it yet, but my wife did, and she found it very powerful and very helpful. And I just thought I would mention that one to you in case you're not that familiar with it. And he mentions a number of things that I had never heard of, which is not surprising. I'm no expert, but I'm reasonably knowledgeable for a layperson. And in terms of natural remedies, and I'd never heard of any of these things, and you have to order them on the internet because that's not available at Walmart. But powerful, and then the antiviral we used is Isatis.
Yes.
And man, it smells terrible. And if you take enough of it, it'll knock you on your backside because of the extract.
Correct. And again, it's all this information is out there, and a lot of these herbs that you're describing is coming back to, Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic medicine. They have used herbs for bacteria and viruses for thousands of years. So it's coming back to those herbs that you're describing.
Yeah.
It's their repertory. And yes, we can find them in the United States, and it's great to have them on hand before we get sick. So yes, everybody may consider having some kind of herbal tincture at home to just help. As soon as one gets sick, you start taking it, and it really, really helps.
The tincture is the word I actually meant, not extract. Yeah, there is tincture form. So what can we do if I'm an individual? You started to say remain healthy, but now it happens. So you dose up on C, you dose up on D, but what can we do to prevent taking in more antibiotics?
Again, that's a big. So you mean for the individual or for the?
Well, society is a bigger problem, but yeah, if somebody wants to, if you will, resist getting more resistant to antibiotics, in general, to try to limit the amount of antibiotics we consume, what can each individual do?
So in the society aspect is, again, can we get the meat that does not have the antibiotics in it. Can we get the dairy? So it would be grass-fed meat. It would be, eggs and cheese and dairy that are organic, because that makes a big difference. Not only does it make a big difference for the society, but for the individual. So we're actually decreasing the amount of bacteria-resistant forms that are coming into the body and the antibiotics that are coming into the body. So that's one way. The other way, when somebody gets sick, of course we want to feel better right away. So if there is a bacterial infection, all the things that we have described, whether it's the tinctures or the individual vitamins, are always great to start right away, and several times a day. It's not you just take once a day or twice a day. It's the body needs higher doses, so maybe every 2 or 3 hours for the first 2 days. And then for those that do have access to naturopathic doctors, I highly suggest sometimes just an IV high with nutrients, an IV high with vitamin C, or hydrogen peroxide IV. It just takes care of it. It's so fast. So
really, it knocks it out pretty quickly?
Go ahead.
I say it knocks, when you do that, the IV vitamin C or the IV peroxide, it knocks out the bad cold really quickly?
It does. It really does. It's an additional support that goes straight through the blood in, versus, it's bypassing the digestive tract.
Sure.
So yeah, that's always available, especially for severe cold or severe flu. I have seen some, over 24-hour recovery, just magical. So that's also available. But for those that don't have that available, it's really high doses of everything we mentioned. And whether you get the book that Jeff was talking about, or have some basic things from supermarket at home, like the Echinacea Golden Seal, vitamin C, vitamin D. You just take them all at once, and then go get extra 2 hours of sleep, so maybe 8 to 10 hours the one night. Let the body do the healing, and do that for 2 nights or 2 days. Usually the faster you catch it, instead of, people say, oh, I have a cold and I'll just keep doing my work, and then if it gets bad, I'll go see a doctor. So almost like, okay, there's a cold coming in, how can I take care of it right at the beginning? So that's usually so much faster also to take care of than later when it's becoming chronic for the being.
Right. I might also mention, you were saying get organic meat, get organic dairy. Let me respectfully suggest that it might also work to get much less meat and much less dairy. Frankly, in our house, we don't consume any of either. But, you don't necessarily have to become a vegetarian or a vegan. Just if you can just consume less of those things, you'll obviously be consuming fewer antibiotics.
Absolutely. And if you think, so that's a whole different talk probably for another time, is nutrients. But just in a quick, nutshell, is meat is very difficult for the body to break down, and it takes, again, it's bringing with it so many toxins, whether it's in the animal's liver from everything that they have consumed, or it's in their body in general from antibiotics. But the big piece is, and it doesn't necessarily bring that many nutrients in. We always have to think about how many nutrients are coming into our body through the food that we eat. And so the meat doesn't really bring that much. So we go more to the vegetables, the organic vegetables, the superfoods like the spirulina and goji berries and others. So yeah, that's a big deal right there, Jeff.
Okay. Well, beyond that, I'd like to have you back another time, of course, because we've done these repeated things, and I'd like to talk in the future about some of the things that I know are near and dear to you, such as chelation and IV therapy. And I know nothing about, except I guess what I read in the Norman Cousins book, The Anatomy of an Illness, about IV vitamin C. But that sounds, frankly, very appealing and really interesting. There are people I know who are watching who believe that vitamin C doesn't do anything for a cold or to prevent colds, and I'm frankly living proof that it does. But in terms of, there are a great many things that vitamin C will do, and obviously I know you know that I'm speaking to the choir. But I'd like to talk to you about those items, the chelation and the IV, and again what people can do for themselves. Specifically, and again, something just for you to think about, or you probably already know about this. I remember hearing something a long time back about how chelation can help either prevent or treat cardiovascular disease.
Yes, and there are many books on that as well. Is that the chelation can pull out, first of all, it pulls out heavy metals, which is that's very healing for the body, because heavy metals get stored in the system and they become toxic for the being. And then also it can pull out any calcium plaques, so it opens up the blood vessels. So that has been looked at. Some research has been done. So that's one other reason why chelation is done and is being effective for many people.
And one other thing before we leave each other for today. I'm sorry, did I cut you off? Were you going to say something else?
No, you didn't. I can't wait to talk to you about the IVs and the vitamin C.
See?
And how we can actually get effective vitamin C at a store versus a non-effective vitamin C. So yes, there's a lot to that. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. The one other thing I wanted to mention, though, while I still have you, is, and I'd like you to address it. I have heard, but do not know for my own knowledge, that with the Affordable Care Act having come in, and now many more people have insurance, there are some health insurance carriers, are there not, that actually cover treatment by naturopathic physicians? I don't know if you know about that, but I assume you do.
Yes, I'm learning about that. There are some companies. Well, first of all, there are some insurance companies that do, once the patient presents the bill to the insurance companies, they will reimburse them up to 80% of the bill.
Right.
And then there are some insurance companies that are really looking into covering naturopathic medicine. I don't know enough about that. I'm in the process of looking more into it, and I have a friend, naturopathic doctor, who is really close to being able to utilize insurance companies. So I'll let you know as soon as I know.
Good. And the reason I mention that is because obviously at least once a year, people can fairly easily change their insurance carrier, assuming the Supreme Court doesn't mess up the Affordable Care Act in the next few months. But the thing is, you can choose an insurance carrier, and one of the choices that you may want to consider, if that choice is available in your area, is switching to an insurance carrier that in fact will cover your naturopathic physician visits, because I know that for some people they'd rather go to a naturopath, but what they end up doing is they go to an allopathic physician anyway, because their insurance covers that and doesn't cover the naturopath, which is a terrible reason to make a decision, but we all have limited wallets and pockets of limited depth, so it's understandable.
You know what I'm looking forward to? When there actually be a lack of naturopathic physicians, because the insurance will be covering them, and then everybody will want to go to a naturopath.
Exactly. That's the way to go. Anyway, thank you again very, very much. The website again is, let me just cover a couple with you. One is drkatka.com, drkatka.com, and the other one that you mentioned was the naturopathic physician site.
Yeah, the naturopathic.org, yes.
Naturopathic.org. Okay. Well, thank you, and we'll talk again soon off air, and I'll send you the link later, and then which is not the same as our link letter, but that's another story. Anyway, I'll send you the link later, and we'll talk again, and we'll talk about another time for you to come on.
Sounds great. Looking forward to it. Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.